Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm JacConsidine. I'm being Professor of Viticulture and Enology at UWA, and I work mainly with grapevines and with wine.
Fabulous job. So could you tell us a little bit about your research and what you actually do?
Okay. Most of the research that I do is to do with managing grapevines and the way in which you look after grapevines in order to produce fine wine or fine table grapes, because I'm doing a little bit of work on the table grape industry at the moment with my son up in Carnarvon.
So what kind of science is involved in your process?
Most of the science that I do comes from industry. So industry has a problem. They may not be able to really define what the basis of the problem is at the moment. So, for example, with the Carnarvon table grape industry, they have a problem with poor yields at the present time. So they can't really say, this is the particular problem that I've got and what its origin is. That's my job, is to try and define for them what the nature of the problem is. So first thing is problem identification. And then once you've identified the nature of the problem, you can begin to look for solutions. So a solution may already exist. So one would go and do a lot of literature searching to try and find whether anybody's published anything anywhere that might provide a solution for the growers. If not, then I go back to a general understanding of plant science, of factors that might influence it. So if we take the Carnarvon situation, for example, in Carnarvon we've got grapevines that are growing outside their natural environment. Grapevines evolved around the Mediterranean and a little bit to the north in a sort of semi-continental climate. Carnarvon's a subtropical climate. So the vines are not well adapted to that subtropical environment. And historically, evolutionarily, they've not been exposed to a climate that's as hot or that has as little chilling. So the problems are therefore likely to be to do with the climate. But they could also be to do with the site, because Carnarvon's a particular site, particular soils, particular other problems which might be related to that. So the idea is then to distinguish between whether the problem is a site-related problem in terms of the nature of the soils, or perhaps the general practices that have grown up in terms of how the growers have been managing the vines in that area, or whether it's to do with the climate in which Carnarvon happens to be located. And it seems that the problem is substantially to do with the climate. So it's a bit hard to manage climates. But there are things that can be done, I believe.
So what will your suggestion be once you've identified the problem? What were your suggestions? How will you go about finding a solution?
Well, the solution it looks as if it will actually require some research. The solutions that were in the literature, which did provide some help, and are to do with trying to overcome the lack of dormancy and dormancy release. So grapevines, they're not an evergreen, they're a deciduous, like a deciduous tree, like a pear or a plum or a peach. And so they need a period of cooling in order to lose their leaves and go dormant, and then a period of warming in order to regreen. And in Carnarvon, the vines tend to grow all year round, and they don't ever become really dormant, and therefore growers in those environments have worked out ways in which they try and manage the dormancy. So they can do that either chemically or physically, but they're still not getting the yields. So the problem that seems to be the major problem that we've recently identified is one that the buds are dying.
Oh, I see.
So, and we thought that might be because they were starved of nutrients, But it seems that that's not the case. That actually they've got a surfeit of nutrients. You know, they're like somebody in Kentucky Fried Chicken or in McDonald's every day. So they've got plenty of nutrients. So nutrients isn't the problem. So we need to then come back to try to find another solution. So one idea that we have at the present time is that the natural habit of grapevines is to grow from the floor of a forest, to stay vegetative and don't produce no fruit and very few side shoots until they get to the top of the canopy. And then when they get to the top of the canopy, they start to produce fruit and start to branch and shade out the tree that's been their host to that time. So it may well be to do with them thinking that they're still not at the top of the tree. And so there's a internal hormonal issue that's causing the buds to shed. It could also be, there's a very similar problem occurs if you try to grow peaches or plums in tropical environments, but they don't shed the whole bud, they just shed the flower at the bud stage. So it could still be related to dormancy, and that we really don't know just yet. So we're still trying to bring together our knowledge of what we know about how plants grow in subtropical, in temperate and Mediterranean climates, and then what things might have changed when we put them in a subtropical or tropical climate.
That's really interesting. So you could actually end up giving hormones to the...
Absolutely, absolutely.
You don't think about giving grapes hormones.
Well, nearly every bunch of table grapes that you buy in the shop that's seedless will have been treated with a plant growth regulator, a plant hormone, in order to make it larger and to keep it in a nice, crisp state.
Oh wow, I never knew that. It's a bit concerning.
Well, these are plant hormones, so they don't have any effect on animals, even though they're vaguely related to the steroids in a sort of a similar path of development, but no impact, completely innocuous. In fact, if ever you have a drink of beer,
I've probably got more.
The grain in the beer mudding process would have been treated with the same hormone.
Okay.
So there's been plenty of exposure worldwide and no problems.
So what will be the next step? You've got the notion of the budding and you think it's hormonal. How will you go on from there?
Well, the next step is that my son and his students are using a molecular biological approach. So what can be done now is that we can take a bud during its stages of development, extract the DNA and particularly the RNA, and then tell what proteins are being produced and what the physiological processes are that are going on. Even if it's producing more hormones or less hormones, or if it's produced what is the total biology that's going on within the cells in that meristem. So it's an exceptionally powerful technique that is now available to science, whereas once upon a time I'd have done years of research in the field. Now they can go and take a little bit of tissue out of the field, bring it into the laboratory, look at its genes and its gene products and tell what's going on and say, well, this is what we should do. Let's try this.
Wow, that's really come a long way. You've been a scientist for a very long time.
Oh!
Sorry. Well, can you explain to us what is unique about science, the process of science, inquiry that science does? How is it different?
Well, science takes curiosity, which everybody has, I think, a little bit of, and then tries to put a discipline to the curiosity so that we can evaluate, anybody can evaluate the conclusion that's a result of somebody's observations or their curiosity about a particular thing. So it involves keeping records, and it involves doing perhaps statistical analyses to make sure that things aren't just by chance. I mean, very often we have, we experience something ourselves as an individual, and we think that that applies to everybody, but really no, it's just something that's happened to me, and that happens all the time. So we need to be, so science takes curiosity and makes sure that when you draw a conclusion about something that you're curious about, that it's something that applies generally. And if another person came down and did the same experiment or took the same observations, they should draw the same conclusion that you draw originally. So you also need to record exactly how it is that you went about it in a way that you can give that instruction to somebody else, and they can go and repeat it and test whether or not you've made a correct conclusion or one that is flawed. So science is open to examination by anybody.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic.